Senator Hagerty of Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Toomey, thank you for holding this hearing. To all of our guests here today, I appreciate your being here. I'd like to touch on something that has been troubling me for some time. We know that FTX's collapse as the second largest exchange is continuing to have ripple effects throughout the entire digital asset industry. But if you look back to even early November, FTX didn't appear to have the necessary scale to cause an industry-wide systemic meltdown. Binance, on the other hand, is the largest global crypto exchange, nearly 7 times larger than FTX by trading volume. At least it was in the month leading up to FTX's collapse. And Binance's market share, now with the absence of FTX, I think means it will only grow. If you think about a similar implosion by Binance, that would really prove catastrophic. It would prove catastrophic for the cryptocurrency industry, and it would prove catastrophic to all of the consumers that utilize the industry. Yet U.S. regulators are limited in the extent to which they can mandate appropriate audits or appropriate disclosure of Binance's operations. Unlike the requirements placed on companies which are publicly traded here in the United States, Binance operates outside of our system. So, Ms. Shope, I'd like to start with you. How can U.S. regulators work with their global counterparts to bring transparency to Binance's activities and to understand the reserves that it holds?
I think you raise a very important point that when we talk about FTX or we talk about Binance, so much of what we're talking about is happening outside of our shores. And the influence that U.S. regulation can have on those exchanges and other crypto projects that are not taking place here is limited. I think it's very important to have an ongoing dialogue with international regulators in order to have influence where we can. But I think the most important thing for the United States to do is to create a rational crypto regulatory framework in the United States to try to bring some of that home so that we have maximum influence over how those businesses are operated.
I hear you, Mr. O'Leary, you touched on this just a moment ago about the impact of regulation and the certainty that it could bring. And from your perspective as an investor, Mr. O'Leary, what needs to change here in Washington from a regulatory standpoint so that capital actually does flow to U.S.-based entities and empower U.S.-based entities to win on a global stage?
Every global platform, the #1 prize is to be regulated in the U.S. market, the #1 financial market on earth, period. Now, when you talk about other money center banks or other financial services industries that want to do business in the U.S., they must disclose their worldwide operations. They are scrutinized by the rules we already have in place. A coordinated effort between the Canadian regulator, the U.S. regulator, the ADGM in Abu Dhabi, the regulators in Singapore, basically laying out the ground rules for any entity that wishes to do business in the U.S. or any of those jurisdictions, solves this problem. If Binance is not willing to, and you started by talking about them, disclose, and the reason that Sam Bankman-Fried claims he spent $3 billion was that he could not get the regulators to approve the fact that Binance owned 20% of their platform. CZ was not cooperative with any of those regulators. He was shut out of those markets, and he realized the prize was to get regulated for institutional capital. Just having 4 or 5 markets coordinate, as we do already in other securities, solves this problem in perpetuity. And all these regulators talk to each other. I've been to Abu Dhabi. I've talked to the ADGM. I seek a license there. And I've done the same in Canada. I'm an investor in the license there. These are long-term, very sound structural concepts, but it needs a coordination. And in one phone call, we could solve this problem.
I'm going to come back to you, Ms. Shope, for a moment. And I want to stay on this concern that I have, particularly about Binance, about the Chinese Communist Party's role in support of that. To be clear, Binance is being proliferated around the world. It's a state-backed network. They're proliferating in emerging markets in a very predatory fashion. They're in developed markets. And again, now they have an even more open platform as FTX has been taken down. But if you think about an example like Binance with ties to the CCP, a committed partner to the Belt and Road Initiative, and particularly as it expands its market dominance with the collapse of FTX, what does that spell if lawmakers here in America follow through with their threats to ban digital assets or leave the current regulatory uncertainty in place. What does it mean for the global crypto market in general? What does it mean for our nation's national security and our economic security? And most important, what does it spell for the dominance of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency?
Regardless of whether Binance itself is connected with the Chinese Communist Party, which Binance denies, but regardless of whether that's the case, by having a system in the United States that's unclear, that's regulatorily hostile, that could go so far as banning cryptocurrency in the United States, we would be losing the position of having the possibility to maintain American dominance for these technological innovations.
I'm deeply concerned about that.
We would also be losing many of the great minds that want to work on these types of projects that can make strides not just in blockchain and cryptocurrency, but in other technological functions as well. To the extent that the United States is not a place that people look to for economic development, that also puts the U.S. dollar at risk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hagerty. Senator